everybody! Welcome to my video series on how to talk to your kids about sexuality. This episode is for the youth leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. You have a vital role in helping your youth to understand the doctrines and principles of the church, including the law of chastity. It can be an awkward topic because it's hard to distinguish whether the things you say are helping the youth to develop a testimony of the law of chastity or to feel like they really understand what's happening. So, I'm going to give you 4 tips on how you can talk about the law of chastity and sexuality in your lessons to teach the youth. Number 1, invite and allow the youth to come as they are. As members of the church, it's crucial for us to accept and invite and welcome all forms of people and the ways in which they identify and express themselves. But sometimes we forget that, and it's hard to welcome new ideas that are different from what we've seen before. For example, my little sister decided to dye her hair purple when she was a senior in high school. Kate, she got some backlash for dyeing her hair that color because apparently it makes her look like a skank. I don't think so. Or I know girls who have gotten nose piercings and leaders who have thought like, oh, she's going rogue. She's not going rogue. Stop. The ways that people identify and the ways that they express themselves are completely different from their testimony, and we cannot relate or judge the two. This is especially true for teens that might identify on the LGBTQ+ scale. So if you have a youth that identifies as trans, or bi, or gay, or whatever, so what? Invite them, welcome them, treat them the same as everybody else. You may disagree with some of the things your youth do in the way that they express themselves or the way in which they engage with the world. But that's not your call. It is not your job to be a judgment of character, of actions, or of things that you might disagree with. Allow them to be themselves. You are simply there to facilitate spiritual discussions and to help them feel loved, help them to find their place in the church, and help them to really grow their testimony. If you really want to be effective in talking about sexuality, you need to let the youth know that they are heard and they are seen as they are. Number 2, be clear and concise about your expectations for the youth and what the doctrines and standards are for the church. When you're teaching the doctrines of the law of chastity, help the youth to understand the expectations that their Father in heaven has for them. Help them to find ways to keep that law and help them to find ways to develop a testimony of it. There are some manuals for the church that are phenomenal, like For the Strength of Youth. That's a great place for you to start. But typically, youth are going to have questions because some of those sections are pretty vague. They're going to want to dive deeper and know, what does that mean, or is this okay? Invite those questions into your discussion to allow the youth to feel like it's a safe place for them to discuss and that you want to hear from them. You want to know what they're struggling with and how you can help. The best way to approach these questions is just to be clear and straightforward. It doesn't work to simply say that pornography is bad or that it's evil or wrong. Youth are going to want to know why. What's so bad about it? If you don't have an answer as to why things are the way they are, it's okay to tell the youth that. However, it is critical in that moment for you to express your testimony of the law. Here's an example of what it could look like. You know, I don't really know the answer to that question. However, what I can tell you is that I know that our Father in heaven blesses us tremendously when we keep his commandments, even when we don't understand all of it. He's asked us just to move forward in faith, and he promises that more knowledge and more light on the subject will come later. The youth will want to know what the expectations and the boundaries are, so to the best of your abilities, explain them, and the Spirit will make it the difference. Point number 3, we need to avoid negative attitudes, catastrophizing, and distorted thinking. Let's take the chewing gum metaphor, for example. You take a piece of gum, you have a girl chew it, and then spit it out and ask if anybody else wants it. And of course, everyone's like, ew, no, it's been chewed up, it's gross, it's been in Susie's mouth over there, I don't know where her mouth has been, I don't want to touch that gum. And then they relate that chewing gum to a girl who has violated the law of chastity. They say that because this girl has slept around, that she's now like this piece of chewing gum. That's like the worst thing you can do. Take it from a health teacher, scare tactics do not work. If you happen to have a young woman in your class who has engaged in sexual activity, when they hear metaphors like that, they immediately feel like they're worthless. Like they are disgusting, they're repulsive, they're not worth anything. Nobody wants to touch them, and it makes them feel evil and unwelcomed and kind of like an outcast in the church's eyes. That's no bueno. If they happen to make a mistake, then they come back to this moment and they feel like there's a point of no return. You can't take a chewed piece of gum and make it unchewed again, right? Run! Yes, when you talk about the law of chastity, it's important to let your youth know these are the consequences. This is what God has said. If you live this law, you will be blessed by A, B, C, and D. If you don't live this law, well, however, repentance is real. The atonement is real. And anybody can come back from a mistake, but it's going to be very, very challenging. Help the youth to understand that any sin that's made regarding to sexuality can be forgiven. but we don't want to focus on that. Your job is to focus on helping the youth understand why the law is important and how they can keep it and how they can develop a testimony of it. Finally, make sure that you address sexuality in regards to priesthood keys. A lot of youth in the church walk away from their teenage years thinking that sex is dirty, evil, and wrong, and then all of a sudden they get married and they're expected to sleep with their spouse their wedding night, and everybody's just like, what? It causes so much confusion, morally, ethically, cognitively. The act of engaging in sexual activity for procreative purposes or for bonding purposes between you and your spouse has been given by God. It's a great gift, but you haven't quite unlocked the power to use it yet. Think about it this way. If a 16-year-old boy were to, let's say give a blessing. He says everything correctly, he goes through the motions correctly, he does everything in the list that he's supposed to. However, he hasn't been set apart as an elder, and he hasn't been given that priesthood authority to perform those blessings. Therefore, his blessing is void. And the same thing goes for sex. Anybody can go through the motions and they can engage in sexual activity. However, it's not until they have made the sealing covenant in the temple that they're given the priesthood authority to exercise that power. It's once you have made that commitment to your spouse and to your Father in heaven that he then grants you access to that procreative and that bonding power. If you're somebody that likes to reference the scriptures when you teach, I got one for you. We're in Doctrine and Covenants section 132, which is all about marriage. Verse 20 talks about the importance of why we be sealed and what it leads to. Then shall they be gods, because they have all power, and the angels are subject unto them. They will have all power. The sealing ordinance is one of the last steps in becoming like our Father in heaven. And he has promised us that when we make those covenants in the temple, that he will give us access to that creative power to bring life into this world, and eventually to be gods over our own worlds to come. That's why it's so crucial that we wait to engage in sexual behavior so that we're worthy of obtaining such power. It's so important that you help the youth understand that it is a great gift and that one day they'll be able to use it to the fullest. My final thought for you is this. Just make sure that you teach from a place of love and that you follow the promptings of the Spirit in your classroom. As you do so, the youth will be able to feel like it is a safe place to ask questions. They will be able to receive revelation for themselves, and they'll be able to better understand the law of chastity. Good luck with your lesson plans. You're going to kill it. Check out these resources for more tips on how to talk to your kids about sexuality.